Hey everybody, it's Party Elite, and today I've got some more important tips for your Battletech gameplay, this time focusing on factors involved when customizing mechs. Whether it's for single player or for multiplayer, there are a few key things to consider, and I hope the information in this video makes them a lot clearer. After all, information is ammunition. Tonnage. The tonnage of the mech determines in some ways its capabilities. This is the maximum carrying capacity of the mech in question, and it determines the class of the mech: light, medium, heavy, or assault. Everything adds up against this number: weapons, armor, equipment, and ammunition. So it doesn't matter if your light mech has enough spots for 4 giant lasers, chances are it can't carry them no matter how much you strip away the armor and equipment. Space. Right up there with tonnage is volume. Just because a mech is able to carry the weight of something, it doesn't necessarily mean it has the space for it. The slots under each section of the mech on this screen show you how much space each section has for various equipment. Some things only take up 1 slot. Others, such as larger weapons, will take up a couple or quite a few. Once again, a mech with, say, 2 or 3 hardpoints for missile weapons won't necessarily be able to carry that many LRM-20s if they're all located on the same location, which segues to our next point: hardpoint distribution. When you're looking at a mech's overview, you get an idea of the type of weapons it can carry, just by looking at this section here in the single-player mech bay, or here in the multiplayer mech bay, or here when customizing a mech. You can see the total number of hardpoints of each type that the mech has: ballistic, laser, missile, support, and jump jet. While this gives you a good idea as to the type of damage the mech can do and what role it might fit, it doesn't necessarily tell you how limited it might be by space. So you'll want to see where all the hardpoints of a type are located on this screen. If it isn't clear, let me clarify. You can only place a weapon of a type where a hardpoint of the same type exists. Combine this factor with my previous 2 points, and now you see how, as an example, having 4 missile hardpoints spread across 4 sections might allow for more options than when they're all in 1 section. A king crab can only carry 2 LRM-20s before running out of space despite having more hardpoints available, whereas a stalker can theoretically carry 4. Weapon position. Apart from the limitations of hardpoints and space, consider a few more factors when it comes to placing your weapons. Weapons on arms get a buff to accuracy, helping you land a shot. In the case of ballistic weapons or solid projectile weapons, you will suffer a debuff to a second subsequent shot to reflect recoil. Are you better off balancing the buff and debuff out, or would you rather have your recoil-free weapons on the arms for constant extra accuracy? Your heavy hitters should be on the arms if possible because of the higher success rate, but make sure you keep those arms well armored and safe. If you have a CT or head weapon slot that fits a weapon you'd like to use, make sure you place it there. After all, if you've lost your head or CT, the day's over for the mech anyway, so it doesn't matter that you've lost the weapons as well. Ammunition position. This one is a big one, and I've seen differing opinions about it, so here's mine. Ammunition is a must-have for ballistic and missile weapons, as well as machine gun support weapons. They don't have to be right next to or on the same section as the weapon though. They can be placed anywhere, and that allows you to make space where needed. However, when your mech gets shot, if the armor has been stripped away through damage, there's the potential of a critical hit, striking and destroying a piece of equipment in the section. If the destroyed equipment happens to be ammunition, it will explode, destroying the part and causing an injury to your pilot, and that will set you back severely. I think that goes without saying. So do not put ammunition on the CT or the head. If those explode, your mech is dead. Consider placing ammunition at the same place as the weapon that uses it, as that way the ammo and the weapon go at the same time, so you're not left with a weapon with no ammunition to shoot with it. Or maybe if the mech doesn't need to be mobile and you're going to do a fantastic job protecting it, you might be able to sacrifice a leg. Whatever you do, make sure you understand the risks involved. Stripping pays. Remember that not all parts need to be armored equally. Armor, just like everything else, adds to the weight of your mech, and if you really just must have that extra piece of equipment, there's always the option of stripping away some armor. Each section has its own values, and the torso sections, center, left, and right, have front and rear values. Rear values are typically lower than front values, and if you're really good, you can reduce those rear values next to nil as long as you make sure to use the terrain and mech facing to ensure your back is never exposed. This is a huge risk and makes your mech a potential glass cannon, shattering more or less immediately when the enemy gets too close, and if it's able to circumvent your defenses and fire into the back of the mech, it's gone in a minute. You might also consider stripping armor from one leg. Losing one leg will slow the mech down and cause some debuffs, but losing both will destroy the mech completely, so this is quite risky too. Arms without high-value equipment are risks worth taking as well, but remember, the less armor you have, the lower your survivability, so this is all a balance of risk versus reward. And I'm just a huge risk taker, I guess. Look at the bars. It's almost as if every square inch of the user interface is laced with information. This section is very important in telling you some baseline stuff to keep in mind. I know this point might sound a little silly, but while some of these will move as you adjust a mech, some things can only be stretched so far, such as melee capabilities or maneuverability. Look at those to understand the limitations or opportunities of your mech, such as this one can get into melee and cause a lot of damage, so let's use it as a brawler and make sure we fill all support weapon hardpoints first and give it a ton of armor all around to make sure it doesn't get destroyed on its way to the boxing ring. Also, look at the ones that shift as you make modifications to get an idea for how it compares to other stock builds, and how well it might do in various situations based on the changes you're making as you make them. Average range, heat efficiency, durability, these are all key indicators, and while I wish they had numbers, unfortunately, they don't. Manage heat. On the topic of these bars, learn to manage heat. There's a certain level of heat that a mech can naturally dissipate per turn. I believe it's about 30 points of heat. So you might be able to move or jump without heating up, but the moment you fire 4 large lasers 2 turns in a row, the smell of bacon starts taking over the cockpit. And God forbid you get doused in flames after jumping and firing lasers. Overheating causes structural damage, and extreme overheating will shut a mech right down. So you'll want to bring in some heat sinks. Each heatsink dissipates 3 points of heat per turn, and you can place them anywhere, and they only take 1 slot. Remember that the biome you're in will affect how well the heatsinks work as well, so you might want to adjust the quantity depending on the situation. Remove some to gain more armor in a cold environment, for example. With that said, don't be afraid to run a little hot. Unless you find a mech is constantly skipping turns to cool down, you're fine. But if you're losing out on armor or armaments just so you can have your scotch on the rocks in your mech, there's just as big a problem. Do test runs and find that happy balance. This is about efficient design. Consider roles. All of these various considerations stem from one core thought, in my opinion: the role the mech plays in combat. If your designated scout and artillery piece look the same, there's a problem on your hands. See, knowing what the purpose of each mech allows you to tailor the mech accordingly. Do you want to use heat as a tactic? Okay, so what roles will your lance need to use that tactic? Probably a fast mech with a lot of support hardpoints for flamers, maybe jump jets, decent armor to be able to survive when focused down on, since chances are this mech will be the first to fully expose itself. Does this mech double as a scout? Nah, let's add a scout so we can use sensor lock separately, but we need it to be able to provide cover to the mobile flamethrower, so perhaps it needs a combination of M lasers and AC-10s to cover medium ranges and draw aggro? What else does the lance need? Again, these are very flexible, and perhaps I'll do a series on lance building if you folks are interested. Just let me know in the comments down below. This is perhaps the most fascinating differentiator of the Battletech games, in my opinion. Nonetheless, let the mech role be the driving force. And on the topic of driving, assign mech warriors. Okay, this one is a bit of a tangent, I suppose, but I like to think of the mech warriors as part of the mech and the mech as an extension of the mech warrior, especially when it comes to roles. When you're upgrading your mech warriors in single player or assigning them for an engagement or for a custom skirmish lance, pay close attention to their stats and how that ties into your mech. For example, if you have an LRM boat with 4 LRM-20s that you intend to use as an artillery piece, make sure the mech warrior within has multi-target and high tactics to reduce indirect fire penalty, maybe breaching shot for the extra effect when single-shotting. Don't assign a mech warrior with sensor lock to this mech, because anytime you use sensor lock, you cannot fire, and anytime you fire, you cannot sensor lock. So just keep in mind exactly what the mech was made for, and give the right mech warrior the job of piloting it. I hope you find these tips useful as you begin to customize your mechs for operations. Remember that each scenario warrants small adjustments here and there, and you will maximize the efficiency of your lance for every operation. Make sure you subscribe to this channel for more Battletech content, and feel free to leave your suggestions for other topics to cover in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching, and cheers.